What's going on? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next we are going to talk about what's going on in the comic market right now. Stay tuned. Alright, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. So if you've watched my market videos in the past, you know that I've started doing these about once every 4 weeks. I've decided that's a little, gives a little more time for more information to come in, and so it makes it a little more useful, I think. Now, based on my prior video, I decided to start watching something new each week, and so what I've added in is a comparison of how the different ages of comics are doing compared to the overall trend. So I'm also breaking out gold, silver, bronze, and modern comics. Copper isn't broken out separately, so those are the four groups that they're broken out based on. And so I think there's some really interesting results that I've seen from that. Now, just a quick recap for what I do with these videos. I watch the weekly Heritage comic auction, and I pick out a number of books, anywhere generally between about 150 to 250 books that I watch each week, and I evaluate what I think the price is going to be, and then I look at what the actual final sales price was and look for trends based on how those sales either exceeded or failed to meet my estimated sales price. Now, historically, what I've done is I've looked at 4 different pieces of information. I've looked at the percent of sales that went above my estimate. I looked at the number of new highs, since I track the high sale, the prior high sale for each of those books. And then I've also looked at the number of books that went 20% or more above my estimate and 20% or more below. Now, this week, like I said, I've added in looking at the gold, silver, bronze, and modern books, but I've taken out the 20% above and 20% below. After seeing that one for a number of weeks, it just was always kind of like a flat line, just randomly went up and down, and just didn't really seem like there was anything real useful there. But the gold, silver, bronze, and modern data, I've gone back a few weeks with that. That one seems really interesting, so I'm looking forward to talking about that one. So with that, I'm going to put up the first chart here, and what this has is it's got 3 lines on it now. So it's got a dark blue line, and what that dark blue line is telling me is the strength of the sales week to week. So this is the percentage of books that went above my estimate. And so if I continuously see low numbers, and so I'm saying numbers below 50%, that's telling me that things are consistently getting worse, because I adjust my estimates every week. When I'm estimating the price of the book, it's based on the current value, what I think the current value of that book is. So if I continue to see the sales go below my estimate, more below than above, and that's telling me things are continuously getting weaker. If I continue to see sales that are going regularly above my estimate, so above 50%, then that means that things are likely getting stronger week to week. So on the chart here, you can see I've highlighted the last 4 weeks of data. This is everything since my prior video. And you can see on August 15th, it was exactly 50%. So basically everything was on average what I expected it to sell for. But since then, every week has been below that 50%, telling us weaker sales every week. And the 1 week prior to August 15th, on August 8th, it was also lower. So for the last 5 weeks, we've had just standard, expected performance and less than expected performance on the sales of these books. The other line that I have on here is a light blue line. You can see there's a red line as well. That's just a average of the light blue line, just to smooth things out a little bit. But we've got this light blue line, which is telling us the percentage of new high sales. So one of the things that I track is the prior high sale for that book in that grade that I'm watching. And if this new sale beats that, then that goes into this number. And so this is the percentage of books that are having new high sales. And to me, what this tells me is the overall strength of the market. If you're constantly seeing lots of new high sales, that tells you things are getting stronger and stronger. If you're seeing a decline in new high sales, it means things are either getting weaker or things are more or less staying the same. You're not getting those higher sales. Now, you can see here it's a pretty obvious trend with this line. This is a definite downtrend that we've been seeing basically since the beginning of June. And that's one of the things I've talked about, where we really saw peak prices in May, early June. And this is really showing us that since then, we've been seeing this constant downtrend, and that has continued over the last 4 weeks. where we've actually seen the lowest numbers that I've seen so far this year, with August 15th tying my prior lowest number at 33%, tying July 11th, and then August 22nd and September 5th actually going the first time it went below 30%, both at 27%. So definitely seeing a continuous downtrend in the number of new high sales that I'm seeing each week. Now, one thing that I think is going to be really interesting with this is to see where it ends up bottoming out. Are we getting close to that? Will it keep going down? Because I don't have any sales data related to that prior to May 2nd. So I don't really know what the baseline was before the comic market really went kind of crazy, when prices just were skyrocketing all over the place. And so this is really going to show us where we're going to end up getting to that steady state where things are kind of level, and then we'll easily be able to see if things turn back up, if we get back up near where we were seeing all these new highs, or if everything's going to kind of level out and we're going to stay around some consistent point. But as you can see, it's been continuously dropping since that late May, early June timeframe. So from this chart, I can really see two common trends. One is the dark blue line, where I'm consistently seeing less than 50% of the sales hit my estimate. So just weaker sales every week. The other one is this light blue line, where we're just on a consistent downtrend, where we're seeing less and less new highs. So yes, sales seem to be getting weaker, and we seem to be having less new highs. However, one thing that I always point out is that when I look at the actual numbers, these values, the sales prices, are quite a bit higher still than they were a year ago. So yes, prices have come down, but they are still very strong compared to where we were. Now, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I also started tracking some new information. So what I was doing is I was looking at what information I could get from Heritage, and if I could actually pull out the gold, silver, bronze, modern age books, so that I could actually have kind of a comparison to see how each of the different ages are doing compared to one another and compared to the overall average. And so don't get mad at me about this, but this is how Heritage breaks them out. This is how they define those eras, and so this is how I can get that data. Golden Age is 1938 to 1955. Silver is 1956 to 1969. Bronze is 1970 to 1979, and modern is 1980 and later. And so the reason I said that is that I know a lot of people also count the Copper Age, and they might have the Bronze Age kind of going into about 1982 or so. But for the purposes of this, Bronze Age is 1970 to 1979, and modern is 1980 and above. And so you can see it's actually a pretty interesting, clear trend that we see with how these books are performing based on the different ages. So you can see here what I did was I started looking at this on the 8th, but because I have this data, I was able to determine what these breakouts were for earlier periods. I could keep going back further, and I might do that, but it takes me quite a bit of time for each one of these, and so I just wanted to at least show what the trend is right now. And you can see that the Golden Age has just been killing it with respect to new highs, with the strength of new highs. It is having as many as 80% of those books hitting new highs, and consistently well above the average. So the average there is that blue line, and I colored these based on the ages to try to make it a little easier. So gold is kind of the yellow color, silver is the silver color, bronze is kind of a brown, and then for modern I just made it a black line. So you can see then the Silver Age, it is almost exactly following what the trend is. It is just right over the top of that blue line, so it's just about meeting the average. Now, Bronze and Modern, way less new highs recently than what the other two ages are showing. Much weaker for those books. And that's definitely something that, at least anecdotally looking at the sales data, seemed like was probably the case, where I had been seeing decreases in prices in a lot of like XMen Bronze Age books, and so that's being shown here, where you can see a lot less new highs with those Bronze and Modern books. And Golden Age, where I've talked about this week after week, how I just kept seeing strong sales in things like pre-code horror, good girl art, pre-code superhero books, and that's shown right here, where you can see that those Golden Age books consistently hitting new highs for those books that are selling on this auction. So from these two charts and from the regular sales data that I watch, you can really see that there's kind of a dichotomy in the comic market right now. There's two very separate groups in this market. So if you watch my last top 10 video about the big sales on Comic Link, or if you've watched this recent Heritage Platinum auction where they're selling all these really big books, the high-end books, the really expensive books, I'm talking about books that are $50,000, $100,000, $1 million, those books are hitting new records, just massive sales, very strong sales. You know, for example, that Amazing Fantasy 15 9.6 that just sold for $3.6 million, now the most expensive comic ever sold. That's the kind of book that I'm talking about. Or there was a Golden Age book in this recent Heritage auction, a Batman #1, a 6.5 that sold for $576,000, another huge record for that book. So these really expensive books, these high-end books, are just seeing strong numbers every time we see them coming up for sale. But if you look at the overall average for these weekly Heritage auctions that I follow, the sales are decreasing. You're seeing lower prices, you're seeing less new highs. Now you're seeing drops from recent highs of as much as 10 to 30 or 40%. And like I mentioned in one of my prior videos, the people who are purchasing a book that's $50,000, $100,000, $1 million versus the person that's buying a book that's $500 or $1,000 are in very different financial situations. And so that's where we're really seeing that somebody that's in this situation that's maybe spending between $100,000 and $10,000 versus somebody that's spending $50,000 to $1 million. The people that are spending $100,000 to $10,000 are maybe not doing as well financially right now, could be more impacted by small changes in the job market or in stimulus or whatever else it might be out there, whereas somebody that's spending $100,000 or $1 million on a book, those types of small changes really aren't going to impact them. And so they're still spending on these books. Now, it will be interesting to see what happens with this. It's possible that these big high sales in these higher end books could have a positive impact on the lower grade versions of those books, but there's no guarantee of that right now. It definitely seems like there's a split going right now where the high end books hitting new records and I'm not going to call them low end books because they still can be very expensive, but the more obtainable books are having their prices either flatline or drop. Now, the other thing that I always like to talk about with this is the sales data that I've actually experienced for myself. And so, like I've mentioned in a number of videos, I also sell quite a few comics. And so I also have kind of a perspective of how my sales performance has been each week. And I had mentioned in the prior video that July was the best sales month I had ever had. And August was the third best sales month I've ever had. So even though we're seeing this decline, it doesn't necessarily mean that things are bad in the comic market. It doesn't mean that things are going south. Like I mentioned, we're still at a place where books are well above where they were selling a year ago. There's still definitely a strong demand for books. It's just that prices have come down some. And so, yes, June and July were my prior two best months ever. August is now my third best month. So yeah, it's declining some, but it is still a very strong comic market, at least from what I can tell. September, it's too early to tell. We're only about a week and a half or so into September, so I can't really say at this point. But when I do my next update, I will give you information about how September went. All right, so now let's talk about some other trends that I saw over this period of time through the sales data. And Heritage is still selling about 1,000 books per weekly auction. This was a big jump from what they used to sell. And so it's possible that this could be a contributor to these declining sales prices. It's possible that we're finally starting to reach a point where they're selling so many books that it's overwhelming the demand with their market, with their buyers that use Heritage. That is one possible contributor to this. I've also heard from people that they think that perhaps it could be because of the platinum auction, the signature auction that Heritage was holding, that people were holding money back to buy books in that auction. That's possible. It's never something that I've seen in the past. I've never noticed that prices really get any cheaper in other auctions when I buy books around those platinum auctions. It's definitely a possibility, but like I mentioned, I think a lot of the people that are spending the $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 are in a different financial situation than the people that might be spending $500 to $2,000, which that's where you're at with most of the books in the weekly auction. So I think it's largely two different groups of people that are buying in those separate auctions. So I don't think it's likely that the platinum auctions have a real significant impact on the prices of the weekly, but it's always a possibility. Now, the other thing that I've been talking about previously that I'd like to go over is specific titles. So how specific titles have performed. And the ones that I've been looking at are Amazing Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, and X-Men, because they consistently have a good number of key issues that sell each week. So first, with Amazing Spider-Man, you can see I've got the sales data for Amazing Spider-Man from August 15th through September 5th. And I've got 4 different numbers that I show. I've got the number of books that sold above my estimate, the number of books that sold below my estimate, and then the number that were 20% or more above, so really strong sales, and the number that were 20% or more below my estimate. And you can see for Amazing Spider-Man, it was weak every single week. The number that went above was lower than the number that went below every single week, some weeks by a lot. You can really see the last 3 weeks, we had 12 go above and 21 below. The next week, 12 above and 22 below. And on this last week, on September 5th, 4 that went above and 18 that went below. So a lot of sales that are going below that estimate. So that's where I'm getting that downward trend where we're consistently seeing books selling below my estimates. And Amazing Spider-Man had been performing poorly in my prior video as well, so that's just continued here. So we've had quite a few continuous weeks of poor performance with Amazing Spider-Man. And I think that's interesting, especially since we recently had the trailer for the new Spider-Man movie, and you might think that we would have seen a spike in sales and in performance in Spider-Man books, but that just doesn't really seem to be the case. Now, I've got another line there on the bottom. I include this now because of the request from one of the commenters, and so I also include the list of books that I looked at for that final week. I don't have them for every week, but just if you're interested, you can pause the video and you can look at that. And those are the books that I evaluated for Amazing Spider-Man on September 5th. All right, so now for Fantastic Four. Again, I've got the same 4 weeks of data, and you can see again, not great performance for Fantastic Four. Back onto a downtrend every single week. We had more selling below my estimates than above. Now, there aren't quite as many key issues that end up selling for Fantastic Four as Amazing Spider-Man, so the numbers aren't as large, but you can still see that big difference. On August 15th, only 3 going above and 9 going below. The last couple weeks, only 2 going above and 4 and 6 going below. So definitely books still continuing to fail to meet those expectations with those sale prices based on their prior sales. Now, they had been on an upswing in the prior video, so they had been trending up. It seemed like maybe Fantastic Four was getting strong again, but definitely in these last 4 weeks, back into a downtrend. And just like I did with Amazing Spider-Man, I also identified the books that I looked at for September 5th, and you can see them down on the bottom on the screen over there. And the last one is X-Men, and I keep thinking X-Men is trying to break out, that it's trying to show some strength again, and it did on August 15th. It was actually pretty strong, 17 above my estimate and only 7 below. So that first week that I looked at here was really good, but back into just some terrible sales numbers. You can see on August 22nd, only 2 above my estimate and 17 below, then 4 above my estimate and 13 below on August 29th. Now it has gotten kind of even again on September 5th. It was a little lower, only 7 above and 8 below, so about even there, but just still a lot of weakness with X-Men. And X-Men in the prior video, the final 2 weeks had been terrible. So that would have been August 8th and August 1st. Just been really weak for that, and so it's largely continued that trend. We did have 1 strong week, but other than that, it's been pretty weak for about the last month and a half or so. Now with X-Men and with Fantastic Four, with those two, I mean, those are 2 titles, 2 series that I think are just primed to explode with the MCU. So I think it's kind of crazy that prices are really dropping, that are weak with those 2 titles, because once we start getting something with the X-Men and the MCU, I see just those books going crazy. We already know we have the Fantastic Four. Once we get some news about something like casting or anything like that with the Fantastic Four movie, I also see those books just going through the roof. So I think seeing these continuous drops in prices, this is when you really want to start looking out for books that you've been trying to pick up. If there were books that had gone up a lot that you were worried about buying because they had gone up so much, this is really when you should be watching for those books to see if there are some that are finally reaching prices that you're comfortable with. Right now, the last thing that I'd like to talk about is just some general other trends. And my big focus for this last video was putting something together where I could look at the different ages, the gold, silver, bronze, and modern ages. So I showed that earlier, and you can really see from that how strong golden age has been. And so that's just, like I said earlier, that's been my continued trend that I've noticed is strength in the golden age. We've seen a lot of that week after week, and that was just definitely proven true with that figure. Now, you could take that a couple ways. You could look at that as, does it mean that modern and Bronze Age books are underperforming right now and that they're primed to go up? Or does it mean that you should be looking for those Golden Age books because they're just so strong right now that there's a lot of demand out there for them? I don't know. That's up to you to decide what you want to do with that information, but I think that there's definitely a possibility that those modern and Bronze Age books, especially from the right titles, you get those keys in XMen, keys in Amazing Spider-Man, that kind of thing. Those are the types of books that could really pop given how they seem to be underperforming versus the other ages. The other way you could look at that is that the prices on a lot of those bronze and modern books really went high fast back in May and June. And so it's possible that people saw those prices going up and then submitted all their books for grading, and it's been a flood of those books into the market. And so that could be also what ended up driving those prices down. I can't say for sure, but one thing I have seen is that the prices are still above where they were a year ago. So yeah, not hitting new highs at any type of level like the Golden and Silver Age books, but they are still some pretty strong numbers compared to where those books were. So the last thing, just what do we do with this? Now that we're moving out of the summer, historically the trend has been that once you get out of summer, you start to see prices start to creep up again, prices start to climb again. So I will definitely be watching that, definitely be looking at these weekly sales to see if we start to see that turning point. We haven't yet. I mean, as you can see from the charts that I've shown, we are still on a downtrend, still having weak sales, every week. And so I haven't seen that happen yet. We just had Shang-Chi come out, which was a real big hit, very popular movie, and seemed to do really well in the box office. So I think that's a good sign for what's coming with Eternals and with the Doctor Strange movie and with the Ant-Man movie. Just those movies that are coming out in succession moving forward, and what types of impacts they could potentially have on the prices of comics. So remember, I will keep tracking that data, so come back and watch these videos in the future. If you enjoyed this, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. I've got more videos over here if you'd like to watch some of my other videos, and the subscription button right here if you'd like to subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video.